Thank you, Dr. Ramesh, for the wonderful opportunity to discuss this interesting scenario. I do not have any financial disclosures. Up till now, we have seen the correct way of doing the things, and we expect that most of the times we get good, satisfactory results, and that means we get happy patients. Though that is desirable, but there are some situations where we do not land up with the desirable results, and this could be in the form of one of the three scenarios. Our residual strabismus, that is, we attempted a squint correction, but some amount of the squint has remained in the same direction. A consecutive strabismus, which means that we attempted a squint correction and the eye has got overcorrected. So previously, if there was a esotropia, we'll end up with a exodeviation. And the third scenario could be a presence of a missed deviation or a new deviation which may come up. A common example of that being when a child has been operated for infantile esotropia early in the childhood. After a gap of about 1.5 years, we may examine the child developing a DVD in the eyes. So how do we manage these situations? Well, the management of these situations can be non-surgical, either with the prismatic glasses if the amount of the deviation is small, but a reoperation may be indicated if the amount of deviation is significant, if it is causing an intolerable double vision, or if there is a significant cosmetic blemish. So how is it different from a normal surgery? For the normal surgery, we have guiding nomograms for both medial rectus, lateral rectus, and similarly for the vertical recti. But when we are planning a reoperation, we are faced with multiple problems. Sometimes we don't know which muscles have been operated previously. Sometimes we know which muscles have been operated, but we do not know what amount of surgery has been done and what is the expected position of the muscles. Then we need to decide whether we need to operate on the muscles which were not previously operated versus the muscles which have been previously operated, and do we actually have any guidelines or nomograms. So we'll first see the first two scenarios. If we are provided with the details of the previous surgery, it's like heaven's gates have been opened for us. We know what has been done and we can directly plan what can be done directly. But if the details are not available, we are in a dilemma. But at the same time, if we look more carefully, maybe especially on a slit lamp, we may be able to pick up which muscles have been operated by looking at the position of the conjunctival scars. For example, this patient has a residual exotropia. She has undergone a surgery in the right eye, and a careful examination showed presence of conjunctival scars over the right eye medial rectus and the lateral rectus both, suggesting right eye was operated and left eye was untouched. We determined which eye has been operated and which muscles have been previously operated. But what is the position of the muscles? Do we have any pre-operative clues, or do we have any diagnostic clues? Or finally, we may have to rely upon the intraoperative details of the such patients. A careful examination may tell us that whether the amount of the previous surgery was optimum, or was there a over-recession, or there could be abnormal thing which could have happened after the surgery was done. For example, if the deviation is committant, it's likely that the amount of the surgery was optimum and there was not a adduction lag or there was not a slippage of the muscles. But presence of an incompetence of deviation or presence of an extraocular motility abnormality, such as limitation of duction of the muscle which was previously operated, tells us that there could be abnormality of the muscle insertion. See, for example, this patient, if we see, there is the presence of a conjunctival scar over the right medial rectus which has been operated, and if we see the 9-gauge motility, we can make out that there is presence of an adduction lag when the patient is looking towards the left side, suggesting that thus the medial rectus muscle may not be in the appropriate position. So what could be such problems? There could be three such problems. There could be a slippage of the muscle, that is, the muscle is no longer attached by its normal insertion but by the Tenon's capsule which is covering it to the sclera. There could be a stretch scar, or there could be a complete disinsertion of the muscle and there is no connection between the eyeball and the muscle. That is a lost muscle. So, are there any clues or are there any investigations which tell us which can be useful in predicting the presence of such a problem? We will have tried ultrasonography, UBM, CT and MRI. All these have their own limitations, and at the present moment these have a poor reproducibility. Same lies for ultrasound, UBM, CT and MRI, though they may be useful to a little extent in predicting what could be the position of the muscles. So we have to rely mostly on the intraoperative findings in such cases. So how do we plan the further surgery? We have decided which eye has been operated, and we think that there could be or there could not be presence of an abnormal muscle. It depends upon whether we have previous operative details available with us or not. For example, if we have the previously available details with us, in such a case, we may have to decide only between whether we have to operate on the previously unoperated muscles or we have to reoperate on the muscles which are previously operated. So how do we decide that? To take a decision, we have to remember the Starling's length tension curve. The Starling's length tension curve tells us that the amount of the muscle slackening that is produced remains predictable over a fairly linear range, but once that critical value is achieved at that level, the amount of the slackening produced will be exponential. For example, for a medial rectus, if we do more than 6.5 millimeters of recession, that is nearly about 11.5 millimeters to 12 millimeters from the limbus, at that point the amount of correction will be unpredictable. So we should try to confine ourselves to such physiological limits. So let us take some examples. Let us take an example of a patient with a residual squint. The patient had a large amount of exotropia. Patient undergoes both eyes LR recession, and this is the data which we have for the patient. There was a pre-operative exotropia of 55 prism diopters. Patient underwent a LR recession of 9 millimeters in both eyes, and after 2 months also still we have a significant residual exotropia of 15 prism diopters. So how do we decide? So applying the Starling's law, again, we know that up to 9 to 9.5 millimeter of LR recession is going to give us predictable result, and this has been already done for the patient. So it may be it will be more useful and more predictable to do the surgery over the medial rectus muscle in this patient. Coming to a second scenario, when the patient had a preoperative large exodeviation, but we don't know what amount of surgery was done, we can determine from the conjunctival scars that the patient has again undergone the LR recession in both eyes, and there is only a small amount of residual deviation which is remaining. We expect that a large amount of LR recession would have been done, and again it will be useful to operate on the previously unoperated muscle. Coming to the third scenario, where preoperatively the patient had a large amount of exodeviation and a previous LR recession has been done as determined by the conjunctival scars, but still the patient is having a significant large amount of the residual deviation. It's likely that the amount of the previous surgery may have been inadequate. So it will be useful in such a patient to do an intraoperative exploration and check the position of the muscles. Thus, for example, on the intraoperative exploration, we find that the lateral rectus is found attached 9.5 millimeters from the limbus, and we know that it is only hardly about 2 millimeters or to 3 millimeters amount of the recession which has been done. So in this scenario, what is the further amount of the surgery that we require? We require nearly about 8.5 millimeters of the recession for this patient, and by the physiological limits, we know that we can go up to 17 mm from the limbus. So such a scenario, we can reoperate on this previously recessed muscle, and we can see the results in such cases. So to summarize, for undercorrections, if the previous details are unknown, we should do an exploration and see if the adequate surgery has been done in the patient or not. If we find that adequate surgery has been done, it's better to operate on the previously reoperated muscles. But if an inadequate surgery is done previously, it may be possible to operate on the previously recessed muscles and get better outcomes. Coming to the scenario of the consecutive deviations. In consecutive deviations, suppose this patient had a esotropia and underwent MR recession in both the eyes. We may take the three scenarios again. First scenario is where the patient, we know the measurements, what was done for the patient. We have a patient with 55 PD esotropia, and patient undergoes MR recession 11.5 millimeters from the limbus, and 2 months postoperatively the patient lands up with an exotropia of 25 prism diopters. So how would we like to operate this patient? We can operate according to the Cooper's dictum on the LR muscles, which says, the Cooper's dictum says that we operate on the previously untouched muscles because the results will be more predictable over there. But is it true for all patients? Maybe not. We should look again at the extraocular motility more carefully. If there is presence of an adduction lag as seen on the extraocular motility examination, it would be better to explore the muscles and plan for an advancement procedure in such a case. Advancement basically means from the intraoperative insertion that we find for the muscle, we bring it forwards. It's a strengthening procedure and is fairly predictable. It is shown that in the literature that about 1 mm of advancement can correct about 3 prism diopters of the squint. So we can plan for an advancement alone if the amount of the advancement is likely to correct the deviation, or we can plan for advancement with resection if the muscle is lax or the muscle was slipped. Just 2 small scenarios more. If the amount of the preoperative isodeviation was not known, what the previous surgery was done, it was not known, but we have a presence of again a consecutive deviation and an adduction lag, it would again be more meaningful to do a exploration and plan for the advancement procedure. But if in such a scenario we have only the concomitant deviation and there is a small amount of residual deviation, it's likely that the muscles will be in an optimum position and we can operate on the previously unoperated muscles in such a case. So this summarizes the chart for the overcorrections. We should look for presence or absence of adduction or abduction lag. If there is presence of such a condition, we should plan for an exploration and plan for advancement or advancement plus resection. Whereas if there is absence of any such thing, it may be better to operate on the other muscles. The new or the missed deviations are a relatively simple condition. For example, if it's a DVD, we need to operate on the previously unoperated muscles. Only thing is that we have to explain to the parents that this was the possible natural course of the disease and we need to do a further surgery. So this tabulates what we have discussed just now. To conclude, there are no clear nomograms which exist for reoperations. We need to rely on the preoperative details. We need to do a careful examination, rule out possible slippage of the muscles, and appropriate plan has to be done depending upon the intraoperative position. Thank you all for a very patient hearing.